I don't know.
Excuse me. Good afternoon to those of you who have joined our lunch and learn this afternoon. Still waiting on a few more participants, and then I'll get started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, good afternoon to everyone who has joined our Lunch and Learn for today. Here at the Association of African American Museums. This is the Pathways to Success Lunch and Learn with MAP, CAP, and STEPS on assessment opportunities for small and mid-sized museums. My name is Ashley Spencer, and I am the project coordinator for the working groups. The Association of African American Museums, AAAM, as we like to call it, is a nonprofit member organization established to support African and African American focused museums nationally and internationally, as well as the professionals who protect, preserve, and interpret African and African American art, history, and culture. So just a few housekeeping items before we start. If you could please put your name and your institution into the chat, that would be perfect. Any questions or comments you have along the way, we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any that pop up, just put them there. And to please remember to keep your microphone on mute. There is also a poll that our Pathways to Accreditation working group would like you guys to take. So if you could take a minute before we get into the nitty-gritty, that would be perfect. And if you have any troubles viewing that poll, please just let me know in the chat and I will get it right to you. All right, so that is it for me. Christina, I'm gonna pass it to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass it to you.
Well, thanks, Ashley, and thanks you all for being here. We're so excited to get into the conversation and share a little bit about just some of the things we've been working on, and particularly how you can help your museum level up. I want to really quickly just introduce my other working group members. So we're joined by Kayla Austin, as well as Samuel Black and Julie Hart. So together we, again, have been working on a variety of things really to help your museum go to the next level. And that's what each of these programs do. They help you to become more excellent at what you're already doing, helping you to take the next steps, so to speak, into excellence for your museum. But one of the things that we realized in working on this kind of Pathways to Accreditation process was that a lot of museums weren't aware of the programs that already exist. There has been a lot of, I think, misinformation, confusion, and so we really wanted to clarify. We really wanted to provide an opportunity for people to ask questions, to learn more about each of these unique programs, MAP, STEPS, and CAP that you'll learn about today. And so I encourage you to please put your questions. We've got the experts who help run these programs here with us today. So please put your questions in the chat. We really do want to hear from you. I also want to remind you and give you a little heads up for those of you who will be attending the conference this year in Baltimore, that we'll be doing a kind of pre-conference session, specifically working on that core documents that you'll hear about later. And so we want to encourage you, if you haven't signed up for the conference, don't forget to do that and to get that early bird registration in, but also remind you that this is part one of a hopefully a longer conversation that we'll continue to have. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dia Najraj, who will speak about the museum assessment program.
Hi, everybody. Can you see my screen? All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you today. As Christina mentioned, my name is Dia Nagraj. I am one of the program officers for the Museum Assessment Program at the American Alliance of Museums. I know many of you may already be familiar with the American Alliance of Museums, but just in case you are not, I'll share a little bit of information with you about AAM. We proudly represent more than 30,000 museums and museum professionals. This includes everything from art museums to zoos. The majority of our members have 0 to 3 staff members, although we serve institutions of all sizes. At AAM, we consider the Museum Assessment Program, or MAP, one stop on the continuum of excellence, something that you might hear referred to throughout this afternoon. This graphic shows the roadmap of the continuum, starting with membership and the Pledge of Excellence, which is a commitment to strive to meet standards to the best of the museum's capacity. And then it moves to core documents verification and finally accreditation. Now, in between these larger sections, you will see these small yellow circles. And these are what we at this presentation represent. CAP, STEPS, and MAP are all programs that, through self-assessment, help guide museums towards best and professional practices. This image of the continuum of excellence looks like a linear process, but the reality is that museums move back and forth and jump around to take advantage of different programs and resources at different points in their development. However, the continuum is always rooted in AAM's core standards. So why would you voluntarily go through the pain and agony of assessing your strengths and weaknesses? Here's what MAP museums tell us. Assessments facilitate working together, re-energize boards and staff, establish shared goals and priorities, build community credibility and support, provide non-judgmental support, and improve confidence. After you've done several assessments, the process of self-evaluation begins to become embedded into your daily operations and practices. Over time, self-assessment is no longer something that you do, it is part of who you are. This in turn increases your capacity, relevancy, and sustainability. I want to dive a little bit more into MAP and the components that make it a really unique and valuable program for small to mid-sized museums. The MAP program design is a unique combination of 5 key elements. The first is team self-assessment, which involves creating an internal MAP team, meeting regularly, using a self-assessment workbook, doing team activities, and discussing and planning together. We match your museum with a peer reviewer who then does a site visit at your museum, which is usually about 2 days. The peer reviewer then writes their final assessment report with prioritized recommendations and resources. Through this time, the MAP team continues workbook activities, takes action on their own ideas and lessons learned from the workbook and site visit, as well as those from the assessment report. We also offer opportunities for follow-up visits for museums who have completed a MAP in the last several years. It is an opportunity to build on the recommendations and support continued growth. MAP is also unique in that we offer 4 different types of assessments. The organizational assessment is a holistic overview of all of the key operations of a museum through the lens of our core standards. Collection stewardship, education and interpretation, and community and audience engagement are considered specialized assessments. They still use the same core standards, but the focus is on a particular area of museum function and how the other museum operations support that area. Many folks wonder where to start. We often suggest that institutions who are new to the self-assessment process begin with the organizational assessment, as it is the most holistic. Our website has a short quiz that can help you think through which assessment type might be right for your organization right now. Each assessment comes with its own workbook that the museum's MAP team uses all year long, with expanded activities and resources, more DEAI content, and a team activity to do during the site visit with the peer reviewer. It is important to note that participating in one MAP does not preclude the possibility of later participating in other assessments. In fact, almost 1/3 of MAP participants have done more than one assessment type. Many museums are curious about the MAP workbook. It takes most museums about 3 months to complete part 1, which is done before the site visit and is shared with the peer reviewer. Each workbook has questions and team activities that help to assess your organization's strengths and current challenges, and they are specific to the type of MAP that your museum is accepted for. This slide shows the organizational MAP table of contents so that you can get a sense of how things are laid out throughout the year. Each assessment's workbook does look a little bit different, but all of them are divided up into the same 4 parts, including content to work on before, during, and after the site visit, as well as content to work on after a museum receives their final report. Of course, then another question we often get is, what can I expect in my report? The outline of the report is based in AAM's core standards, so the report will touch on many different aspects of the museum's work, with the focus being determined by the type of MAP assessment. Peer reviewers provide an honest snapshot of what they saw and learned and experienced from the workbook, through conversations in their research, and during the site visit. It will highlight good practices as well as those that need improvement. These reports will provide manageable recommendations and resources that the peer reviewer thinks the museum will be able to use to move forward. So let's dive into eligibility for a second, because I'm sure that's on everyone's minds. To be eligible for MAP, your museum must be a nonprofit, whether private or public. You must have at least one professional staff member or the full-time equivalent. Your institution has to be in a U.S. state or territory and open to the public for at least 90 days a year. In addition, the museum must care for, own, and or use tangible exhibits or tangible objects for exhibition. It is also important to keep in mind that AAM membership is not required to participate in MAP. Depending on the specific assessment type that you are applying for, there may be additional eligibility requirements. We have full eligibility information and additional details available on our website, which I will link to in the last slide. So how much does it cost? Well, we are really excited to say that starting this year, there is actually no longer a participation fee for MAP. The material support and site visit are valued at about $4,000 to $6,000, so we are really excited that we are now able to provide it without that participation fee. That being said, some museums do choose to have a 2 peer reviewer site visit, depending on their size and needs, and choosing to have a second peer reviewer does come with a set fee. Many museums across the United States have success stories from going through the MAP process. Since the program started in 1981, over 5,000 small to mid-sized museums have participated in MAP. Of that group of 5,000, over 1/3 have participated more than once, and over 60% of AAM accredited museums have participated in MAP. I've touched on some of these, but I wanted to kind of highlight some of the impacts and results that MAP museums have seen. This includes everything from more aligned mission, operations, and resources to being able to create or improve policies and plans. Also having a more engaged and educated board, increased fundraising success, and working to build stronger community relationships are other areas in which we've heard that MAP museums have experienced a lot of growth and improvement. As I wrap up, I want to leave you with a quote from a museum that participated in MAP in 2020. The Springfield and Central Illinois African American History Museum participated in the MAP organizational assessment in 2020. Until participating in MAP, we were a dedicated and passionate volunteer board of directors without a lot of direction on how to achieve our goal of growing the museum and showcasing African American history. The rigorous organizational self-assessment through MAP helped us to better understand where we currently were and realize future possibilities. We could not have achieved growth without the guidance of our peer reviewer. We applied and received a grant from IMLS for an executive director based on our work through the MAP. Our work was virtual in 2020. We met in person and spent 2 days with our peer reviewer in a follow-up visit. She offered us more wisdom and ideas for further growth. Museums from across the country have similar success stories, and we are always thrilled to hear from past participants about how they used the skills and recommendations gained through MAP. Before I wrap up, I would be remiss not to leave you with a little bit of information about our actual application. The next application deadline is expected to be February 1st, 2025. We will open the official online application later this year, and you can access all of the application details, including how to apply, on our website. We will provide a sample application, have frequently asked questions, and other resources available to help you through the application process. And we are also always happy to answer any questions that you have that are not answered on the website. If you would like to be notified when the application goes live, I will have my contact information on the next screen, and you're welcome to send me an email and I can add you to that list. And so I know I've shared a lot of information in a relatively short time, so I wanted to include our contact information and our website. Our website is a treasure trove of information to help you get further acquainted with MAP. If you don't want to write down the full URL, you can also scan the QR code and bookmark it on your device. I've also included our contact information, that for the general MAP inbox and phone line, as well as the direct contact information for myself, as well as my fellow program officer, Brianne. We are always just an email or phone call away for any questions that you may have. So thank you so much for letting me join you today, and I would like to now pass it over to my colleague, Asia Bain, who will be talking about STEPS.
All right, thank you so much. Let me share my screen here. All right. So my name is Asia Bain. I work at AASLH, which is the American Association for State and Local History. And I'm going to be talking to you about our STEPS program, which stands for Standards and Excellence Program for History Organizations. So if you're not familiar with us at AASLH, here is a pretty brief overview to who we are and what we do. Like AAAM, we are a national membership association that provides education and support for our members in the field. We were founded in 1940, and we now operate out of Nashville, Tennessee. And we are not a museum-only organization. We are all things history. So that can be museums, historical societies, libraries, schools, archives, parks, individuals, students, anyone involved in preserving and interpreting state and local history. We are an organization for them. We provide that education aspect. Like I mentioned, we have virtual and in-person classes and workshops. We do a lot of webinars. We have a conference every year. This year, we're going to be in Mobile, Alabama. And we also publish educational books as well. And really, our main goal is to help people out there whatever kind of site they're at, whatever kind of budget they have or don't have. We help them to do meaningful history work with the resources that they have. About a quarter of our members fall into that small museum category with having the budget under $250K, and about a quarter of that group has budgets under $50K. So we really have a heart for the smaller sites and try to provide a lot of practical, realistic education and resources for those folks especially. So the STEPS program that we have here is our self-assessment program. It's designed for small and mid-sized organizations. Sometimes larger groups will use it as well, just because kind of a refresher course. But what STEPS offers is that step-by-step assistance and guidelines on sort of the basics of being a good, progressive, ethical site or museum. It is designed so anyone can use it. You don't need any kind of formal training or particular history or museum knowledge to go through this program. I often tell people it's kind of a museum studies program in a box. It just lays out the foundations of these 6 topics that I'll get to on the next slide, and really just make sure that you have a good foundation for your work, where you know what you need to be an ethical and legally compliant place that preserves the things that your community has put in trust with you, and that serves your community with what they need. It was initially developed in 2009 and then got a significant revamp in 2020. So here are those 6 sections or chapters that I mentioned. You saw these listed on the cover of the workbook in my first slide. And these are just the topics. You'll notice some overlap with the other programs we're going to be talking about today. But these are just sort of the things that the field generally agrees are the 6 aspects that divide up the world of being a good ethical history organization. So again, there are some sort of administrative bits like the mission, vision, and governance and management. There is guidance on interpretation, guidance on working for your audience and engaging with your community, and then the more collections-based, taking care of the tangible stuff, whether that's collections of objects, documents, but also historic structures and landscapes. So here is what we see as really the purpose of STEPS, the beauty of STEPS. STEPS can do a lot of different things for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So these are just some examples of what we know that STEPS it can be useful for. A lot of people find value in using STEPS to educate their board members, again, who may or may not have that history or museum background, educating them about this is what museums are supposed to do. These are the rules that we are supposed to follow. This is kind of what we need to get on board with in order to fulfill our responsibility to our community. STEPS is great at providing a structure and a framework for prioritizing your goals. We all have so many things that we want to do in our work and that we want to do for our community, and it can be really confusing and intimidating knowing where to start. So STEPS can also help you to be proactive, not just reactive. STEPS can help you get the structure and the documents especially in place. We know that problems and issues are going to arise in our work, but by being prepared beforehand, those issues can be just a little speed bump and not a wall that stops your work. STEPS can also help you justify decisions that might not be popular. Again, sometimes we work with folks or in communities or with board members who might not have the same perspective on history or museum work that we do. STEPS is a way that you can show them the expert guidance of a national organization that says this is what we need to be doing, so it can help you justify some of those hard decisions. And in the same vein, it can help you kind of sunset maybe things that have been happening for a while at your site or museum that are just no longer in line with what we want to be doing with museums. Steps can help you argue for those kind of things as well. Again, just support more meaningful planning for the future by kind of giving you a picture or a vision of what you want your site to be in the future, giving you the picture of what your goal is. And then it's also really handy to help you make funding requests and fundraising campaigns by, again, giving people a good idea of what your goal is, what you're striving towards, what you want to be using that money for, what their donations will be used for, things like that. And just as important, there are some things to understand about what the STEPS program is not. STEPS is not accreditation. Folks often use it as a step towards those kind of programs. But STEPS itself is not an accreditation program. It is self-assessment. So it's on your own time, on your own assessment. It's not graded or timed by us. So that can honestly be a benefit. I'm sure all of you are very, very busy people, and it's hard to find time for yet another project or another program in your work. Again, that's part of the beauty of STEPS. It's not timed. You can do it at your own pace. Some people get through it in 3 to 5 years. Some people are still working away at it in 10 years, and that's okay, because it's about progress. It's about the journey. There's always going to be more things we can do and think about to be good history sites, good museums, and STEPS just helps remind you what those things are. STEPS is not just for, quotes here, real museums or professionals. You don't have to be any kind of official anything to use STEPS. Like I said, it's written for folks who don't have any kind of history training. You don't have to have any sort of 501c3 status or any person with any sort of letters after their name on your staff to use STEPS. It truly is for everyone. It's not an all or nothing program. If there are parts in there that don't apply to you, you just skip them. The most common one is the historic structures and landscapes. Some museums are just in new buildings and they don't take care of historic structures or landscapes, so they just don't have to worry about that bit, and that's fine. And emphasizing again, it's not for individuals, it is for an organization, a site as a whole. Even if you only have one staff person or they're all volunteer, it does need you to be in a kind of organizational setting like that, except for consultants. Consultants sometimes are called in to help folks with STEPS, so that might be the only exception to the is this for individuals or not rule. All right, so when you enroll in the STEPS program, you get a couple of different things. Some of them are physical things we send you in the mail. Some of them are virtual things. The biggest kind of tangible thing is you get the workbook that you saw in the picture on my first slide. It's over 200 pages. It's spiral bound for easy Xeroxing. So that's sort of the physical thing that you get. And a lot of people like this physical aspect of it, and that you can bring it to board meetings. You can keep it on the shelf in your office. You can consult it. You can Xerox pages and mark them up with whatever you need to. STEPS also includes a virtual community. We have an online forum website where you can chat with other people across the country who are going through the program, ask questions, get feedback, have Q&A time with them. That's a really valuable component. You also get discounts on the other educational things that we provide here at ASLH. And part of STEPS, again, it's self-assessment, it's not accreditation, but you can apply for progress certificates. And a lot of people find those really valuable to kind of mark when they hit their goals, when they hit some milestones. And then you have something that you can bring to your board meeting, show your board, put it in a frame on your wall, and kind of help communicate that value with your community members that you're working on getting your site where they need to be, and that you're working with a professional organization to do that in the most efficient, best way possible. So here is just a quick preview of what the inside of the workbook looks like. Kind of see how it's structured there. So this would be probably this is from the collections chapter. And so another great thing about STEPS is that you can go through it on 3 levels. There's basic, good, and better, and they're sort of tiered like that. That means you can go through STEPS multiple times as you kind of get yourself together, are able to find more resources. And it helps break up, big ideas and your big goals into small bites, small things. You can see here on this one, the question, again, this is in the collections standards chapter, just self-assessment questions. Do we have written procedures for acquiring, borrowing, and lending collection items? If you're starting at square one, in the basic square, you're just like, all right, to get better at this, we need a written donor form, a written loan agreement, and the loan agreement should say how long the loan is for. That's all you need for the basic step. And then good and better will be a little bit more complicated to work up to as you have the time and the resources and things like that. Like I mentioned, it's spiral bound, so you can make copies, you can mark it up, you can do everything you need to. It really is meant to be a workbook that you use in that capacity. And here again are just some questions that STEPS can help people answer. I'm sure you've all encountered one or more of these at some time in your work when there are just so many things that you want to do, or so many things that are an issue, and it can be just so intimidating knowing where to start, which fire do you need to put out first. And STEPS can really help you prioritize those things, understand what is your most pressing concern that you need to focus on right now versus what can you maybe put off to next quarter or next year. It can help you understand what your organization is capable of in-house versus what you might need to go to other people or professionals or organizations for. And like I said, just understanding what is a reasonable goal for your organization and where do you need to be really focusing and making those goals on what you want to look like in the future. So like I said, people all over the country participate. Last count, we have over 1,100 organizations. Like I said, all kinds of sites, all kinds of sizes, including all volunteer organizations. Something that folks like to do that we support them in doing is creating STEPS groups, which are, like it sounds, it's a group of several organizations, either in the same local area or with the same, their organization has like the same focus or something like that, that get together and kind of do STEPS as a team. And so they, have virtual meetings every once in a while, talk about what difficulties they're facing, how they're working through the program, and really just provide support and accountability for each other. And here are just a few STEPS testimonials I pulled from some of our marketing materials on things that STEPS participants told us that the program helped them do. A lot of it we've already touched on, helping you to be more forward-thinking, thinking about the future rather than just getting kind of bogged down in the day-to-day, an opportunity to think creatively, permission to experiment, and then again, that ability to sort of back up some of your requests for funding by showing where your needs are, that your needs and your goals are legitimate and recognized and supported by a national professional association. They're not just things that you're making up. So that's, again, things that people find valuable, help that STEPS can bring them. So just summing up here, STEPS is a lot of things, but I think these are the most important things that it is. It is a how-to manual that you do on your own timing, and you decide what's most important for your organization. A how-to manual that treated every organization the same and offered everybody the same advice would not be so useful. A benefit of STEPS is that you can customize it to your own situation, your own community, your own goals for what you want your site to look like in the future. It's guidance from a trusted organization. STEPS is recognized across the field as an assessment program, and it's a great way to show that you are dedicated to getting your organization where they need to be and that you're following trusted best practice guidance. The community aspect, again, is really, really important. You know, we can, in ASLH, we can tell you all day long how what's in STEPS is important and how you should go through it, but being able to talk to other people who are in the same situation that your site is in, who are also going through this, is just absolutely priceless. Having that kind of community of support is really valuable, especially if you're in a geographic location where you don't know other museum people or other history people, and you kind of feel yourself a little bit alone and having to reinvent the wheel just because you don't have access to that kind of community. STEPS is regularly reviewed and updated. Like we said before, we just did a revamp in 2020, and we have a process to always be reviewing the material and the guidance in there and making updates as needed. And bottom line, STEPS is just advice to get you where you want to be, whatever your goals for the future, for your site, for your community, for your organization. STEPS is just a tool to help you get there. So here are some important numbers about it. There is a cost associated with STEPS. There's a one-time enrollment fee right there, $195. To receive the certificates, you must maintain AASLH membership to do that. Our memberships are tiered by your organizational budget, so the folks with the smallest budgets pay the least. So if your budget is under $50K per year, that membership is $98. You can purchase extra books, and the content is also available on the members only website too. So if those extra books are going to be a barrier for you, it's all the whole book is scanned on the member website as well. So you can forego the extra books if that's gonna get in the way. And I wanted to point out that state organizations, humanities councils, things like that, they will often sponsor groups. They will often write grants to get money for a STEPS group of 12 local organizations to enroll in the program and work through it together. So that's another thing. If the financial aspect is going to get in your way, there is definitely a possibility that a larger state organization may be able to sponsor this for you. And just our final takeaways, it's self-assessment on your own time. You decide where you want to go, you decide what's most important for your organization, and we just help you lay the path to get there. It is something that carries value with a lot of different people. It's both a manual and a community. A lot of times people will think STEPS is just the book. The book is important, but the people that you talk to and work through the book with are just as important. And the program is, again, just a step towards your desired future, whatever that might be. So here's some contact info for me. You can see my email there. There's the phone number for the office. You can talk to anybody in our office about STEPS. And you can also read a little bit more on the website there. That should be linked. But please contact me via email or phone anytime. I would love to talk to you more about STEPS, help you decide if it's something that would be beneficial for your site, if it's something that is appropriate for you to jump into right now, or it's a maybe later thing. Talking to your board about it, talking to your board about getting the money to get involved. I'd also be happy to connect you with people in your local area that we know are doing STEPS. You can really get that firsthand perspective, firsthand testimonial for them. I would love to do all of that for you. So please just contact me if that would if that would be useful for you. So thank you very much for your time today. And I am going to pass off the presentation to Tiffany Amig.
Thank you, Asia. Just a second, I will pull up my presentation here. Okay, thank you all so much. You should be seeing my intro slide here that just has the name of the program. My name again is Tiffany Amig. I am the Deputy Director of the Foundation for Advancement in Conservation, which you'll hear me refer to as FAIC. Just a little bit about FAIC. We are a 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to save cultural heritage for future generations, protecting it from decay and destruction. We are a partner organization with the American Institute for Conservation, which is a national membership association for conservators of art and historic artifacts. But on the foundation side, we focus more broadly on a lot of outreach programs, including connecting to collections care, which you may have heard of, the CAP program, which we're talking about today. Also some grant funding related to outreach and conservation. We have two programs, the Holly Maxon Conservation Grants and Community Partnership Project Grants, there's more information about those on our website. And then I also always like to let people know about one key emergency response program that we have called the National Heritage Responders. They are a team of trained conservation and collections care individuals who are available on a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hotline at the number that I have on this slide. If you ever have a disaster that affects the collections in your care, so if you have a pipe burst or a hurricane has hit your building, a flood, anything like that, you can call this number and get connected with someone who can walk you through steps to help you save your collections. So we like to make sure people are aware of that. So I'm here today to talk about the CAP program. What is CAP? CAP is a program that supports general conservation assessments for small and mid-sized museums. We administer the program at FAIC in partnership with the Institute of Museum and Library Services, much like MAP. CAP is often a first step for museums that want to improve the condition of their collections. So if you're like most people, you might then ask, what is a general conservation assessment? It is a big picture overview of your collections, the buildings that protect your collections, your building systems like your HVAC, and the policies and procedures that you have related to collections care. And the goal of that is to determine your museum's greatest collections care needs and opportunities. How does the process work? The most important thing, I think, is that this is a team process. So there is an internal component. The internal part of the team is your staff, your board members, or volunteers who work with the collections. And by that, I mean anyone who has any sort of tangential responsibility for collections. So the leadership of your organization, security, anyone who's going to be around the collections, and for a lot of you, that might be all one person, and that is absolutely fine. But we do encourage you to get as many people involved as possible. It just helps your assessors get a well-rounded understanding of your museum, and it just creates institutional buy-in. So if you have a board, or if you have a parent organization, getting them involved in the process is also encouraged. So the other members of your CAP team are your two assessors. Most museums have two. One is a collections assessor that's usually a conservator, and one is someone with a buildings background. So that might be an architect, an engineer, or a historic preservationist, depending on what type of building your collections are located in. And the two assessors work collaboratively throughout the process to develop these prioritized recommendations for improved collections care. The CAP process takes about a year, and it's comprised of multiple steps. Once accepted into the program, museums will select 2 assessors. We provide a list of approved assessors, so you're not on your own for that. We have a list of about 100 collections assessors and 100 building assessors that we provide and talk to you in an orientation about what to consider when you're choosing assessors. Once you select the assessors, the museum will provide some background information through a site questionnaire that we have electronically. It asks questions about more questions about the organizational structure, collections, buildings, building systems, policies and procedures, but it's not as it's not the steps workbook that's quite large and detailed. These are kind of broad overview questions. As you near the site visit, you would then hold a pre-conference phone call with the assessors just to kind of prepare for that site visit. But really the heart of the process is this 2-day site visit, at which time the 2 assessors would visit your location, tour buildings, look at collections and exhibition spaces, talk to various members of your team, and they'll be looking at things like the lighting in your building, the storage materials that you're using, the environmental controls you have, if you have any, things like the outside landscaping around your building, all sorts of things that might be introducing some vulnerabilities to your collection. All of this culminates in a written report. They usually go home, and maybe 6 to 8 weeks after the site visit, they would submit a written report that outlines their recommendations for how you can improve your collections care at your site. And then about a year later, you have the opportunity to meet with the assessors once again. This time it's virtually, usually through a Zoom call or a phone call, just to report on progress, request any additional advice, address any challenges you might have reached while you were trying to implement some of those recommendations. So how can CAP help? I can help. I know as a former collections person at a small museum, I had to try to catalog the collection, build exhibits, take tours through the sites, ring things up in the gift shop, dust when I had time. So this kind of helps you, it forces you to step back from all of the things that are like right in front of your face that you have to do right now, and gives you time to do some long range planning. So CAP is a good way to start that process. It's also evidence of a need for funding. So as the other folks have said today, having this CAP report and being able to submit it with a grant proposal just shows that it's not your pet project that, oh, I just had this idea out of nowhere and here's what I want money for. It just shows that you've had an outside consultant come in and tell you that this is a priority, and that by giving you money, they're going to help you. And also outside perspective, I'm sure none of you have this issue, but on occasion we have heard that sometimes we all know what we need to do, and we all know what we need in terms of resources in order to do what we want to do, but it can be hard to convince your leadership, whether it's a board or a parent organization, that they should invest in these things. So having this outside perspective can also just give weight to the things that you're already saying. So this is all kind of nebulous. I wanted to give you some specific examples of things that have come up in past CAP reports. This is not all one person's report, or one institution's report. It's also not the full executive summary, but these are just some things that might be addressed. In one case, we had a critical recommendation that the organization contact a fire department to assist with disposal of a fire grenade that was in their collection that they thought might still be active. Some high priority things include updating the collections management policy. Medium priority might be installing UV filters over light fixtures. Low priority might be installing an air filtration system. And I give these as examples, one, to show the fact that these are prioritized, so it helps you. It's not just a laundry list of things you need to do with no guidance of where to start. The other thing I like to show is that some of these things you could do fairly quickly with no real cost other than time to your organization. Others you may need to fundraise for. So we've talked a little bit about what CAP does. We haven't talked about what it doesn't do. It doesn't provide grant funding. It's not flexible funding. There's no money for implementation afterwards. There are separate grant programs that we can refer you to that would provide assistance for implementation. And it doesn't support treatment or item level surveys, just that overall assessment. All types of museums are eligible. And we have similar eligibility requirements as MAP. You do have to be a nonprofit or a unit of state, local, or tribal government located in the US, organized on a permanent basis for educational or aesthetic purposes. You have to own tangible objects and make them available to the public on a regular basis. I point out here that we do not have a 90-day requirement or any specific days in a year that you have to be open to the public. We just say on a regular basis, and then we ask you to tell us what that means. And then you also have to have one full-time staff person or volunteer. Ineligible institutions would be federal agencies, organizations that are primary libraries or archives, or historic structures that don't have collections, or institutions that are too big to be assessed in 2 days. How much funding does CAP provide? We provide an allocation of $3,600 to $4,000 per assessor, based on the size of the institutional budget. This is it can get a little confusing. So if you are interested, the best way might be to just contact me to try to talk through the fee structure. But all of our assessors are independent contractors. They all may do this on their own, independently of our program, and they all set their own fees. So it is hard for me to know exactly what a fee structure is for any participating organization until they get started. But you can see an example on here. If the professional fee is $4,000 and we've allocated, I'm sorry, if it's $4,700 total and we've allocated $4,000, then the cost for the museum would be $700. We also have a one-to-one cost share requirement, which is typically for smaller organizations shown primarily through the time contributed by staff and volunteers. And then we don't have a solid announcement of the 2025 program yet, but we anticipate the application deadline will be February 28th, with all application or all assessment activity completed by the end of 2025. I'm going to just skip through here in the interest of time because I want to give time for 1 or 2 questions, but we do have some quotes from participants, and I will share my contact information in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. I really do appreciate that. Since we are bumping up against our time limit, I do want to open the floor up to any questions you might have. You can put those in the chat now if you would like. Christina, do you have anything you would like to add?
Well, I just want to thank all of our presenters for being here today. I hope that you all have seen there are a wealth of resources and programs available to help your museum move through the process, whatever it looks like. One of the things I think the 4 of us, Sam, Julie, and Kayla and I have said often is that it's paths to accreditation that it's not just about an endpoint or getting to a stopping place, but it's about helping your museum along the journey. And so I want to thank all our presenters for being here and showing us what some of those paths look like.
Thank you, Christina. And I do want to reiterate that the information will be available to our participants later today. Everything you learned from STEPS, MAPS, and CAPS will be available, and there will be a handout as well as a survey going out later today. Any questions? I haven't seen any yet, but before we wrap this up, any questions from anyone? All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to the representatives from MAP, STEPS, and CAPS for joining us. Thank you to all of our participants. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the Association of African American Museums, and then we can also put you in touch with those resources that we had today. Thank you and have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.